if you watched Iowa State, if you sort of, go back and look at, his role there and his usage there, it was in a very, very sort of niche role for Iowa State as kind of a floor spacer, a guy who I think, was limited by his back injury, from doing much else and really being, or at least effective off the bounce. But most of his shots in his college career, like 70% of them, have been catch and shoot threes. He's a guy who's going to space. He's really good at sort of moving and finding pockets of space and making himself available. Defensively, he's a guy who's played a lot off the ball. So he's a team defender and a floor spacer and a guy that, in a year where Iowa State was pretty short on depth in the backcourt, could give minutes to TJ Otzelberger. But really what you're hoping is you're getting some 3-and-D depth here. But, you look at the shooting that they've brought in. John Tonje's a really good, floor spacer. Tamar, for his inconsistency off the bounce and some pull-ups, became kind of a consistent shooter last year. If Isaiah Mosley is back and he's actually in a full capacity, he's shown he can be a pretty good shooter off the catch. Nick Honor is a good shooter off the catch. Depth hurt this team, or a lack of it, last year, or down the stretch, I should say. But is Caleb Grill going to be the linchpin in that? I'm not sure that that's the case. You don't turn your back on shooting at all, especially not in this environment, especially with the pace that Missouri wants to play. But I think it's important to keep perspective on what Grill would sort of bring to the table there. Definitely add some shooting to the mix, but is he a guy that, you're going to need to have go 20 to 25 minutes a night? Probably not. Again, helpful, but not absolutely vital for this roster configuration to work. So that's sort of, I guess, my realistic sort of outlook on what Caleb can bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely like, if they had him on campus, clearly like the interest levels for them and for both sides is high. I do think that he's a guy who, by all means will be able to help the team next year. He does bring a level of toughness, a little level of grittiness. He's a plus athlete when he's healthy. Yeah. And a guy who is capable of knocking down in shots. You sort of bring all those things together, and I think it forms into a guy, who can be a role player on a really good basketball team. And I think what you alluded to with, Missouri's struggles with depth, like once Trey Gamillion got hurt, and it trimmed, and not only Gamillion, but Isaiah Mosley's lack of availability. Those two guys trimmed the guard depth to a point where it was a struggle on a lot of nights, to sort of be able to rebound, quicker. And you're asking Demoy Hodge, as an example, to play, 35, 36, sometimes 38 minutes, as opposed to, I think what Dennis Gates probably envisioned was him playing more like 28, and really kind of maxing out a guy minutes-wise, being in like the 30 to 32 range versus where they were, which is in the high 30s. And that's tough that's tough to do, especially in the SEC, which, we've talked about the level of athleticism in the league. It's a really, really tough physical league, and that can wear you down. And I think it did at times for Missouri.
Yeah, and you look at what they did on short turns too. I think it hampered them at times. When they had to come back and they had to do it on a quick turn against Princeton. That was a team too, or even if you're not talking about physically, but just the ability to sort of look to the bench and go, okay, what can I do to reconfigure some things here to give myself an opportunity? I think they were sort of limited in that way, as the season wound down. The one thing I would say is that they look like they really want to skew towards guards. And I think that's been the thing that's been hard, I think, for folks to reconcile, because the focus has been on what's missing, which is a starting level big. But you really look at what happened when they, had three guards that left the program, and you weren't sure still about Isaiah Mosley's status. So really that's 4 guard spots you sort of have to reinforce. And I think the hard part is it's looked like there's been sort of a de-emphasis or them dragging on a big, which isn't true. They've clearly prioritized Kadeen Shedrick, but I think people have, need to keep in mind they had to replace 3 to 4 guards. And, they had to get a, guy that could sort of, had the same sort of physicality and sort of role as Dree Golson. That's John Tonji. If you were to, look at Bates's usage level and possession and touches at IU, very comparable to Drake Million. And if you landed, at Caleb Grill, he was about 9 possessions per game last year. You're starting to offset a little bit about what Hodge is there. So is it perfect? No, but you begin to backfill a lot of that production, and you're not taking a hit and shooting. The ability to make open jumpers for him, last year to next year potentially doesn't fall off. So I think that that's just something to keep in mind here is, the pressing need in one position, I think is sort of at times downplayed the need to, do some reinforcements and refreshing at the guard position. That's what it looks like they're trying to do there at this point. That's probably the best way to probably frame it as sort of we come to the end of the portal season.